Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Breaking Muscle podcast. As ever, I'm your host Tom, and today I am joined in the same room by my guest Tarek, who's a colleague of mine at City Athletic and the founder of the Physique Institute, aka PT Shubs. Now, the unusual thing is we're sat next to each other, we're going to have a chat. Tarek, say hello.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on the podcast, Tom, and it's pretty unusual being in the same room as someone doing one of these podcasts.
Yeah, like for the last year I've just stared at Zoom or Skype or variations of that, chatting to people, but nice to be in the same room to discuss things. And today we're going to focus on the topic of stress. Now stress is something that contributes to your results in the gym and how you change your physique with your training, but it's far wider implications. It can play a massive role on your mental well-being. And this has been brought into sharp focus, like we said, the pandemic this last year. It's been a tough time for everyone. Now, obviously you've had your ups and downs in the year, I'm sure, but you've coached numerous clients through that period as well. And you've even given talks on stress and managing stress and sort of well-being over this time period. How did you develop that interest in stress management? And then we'll explore that a little bit wider.
So a little background on myself. I've kind of been working in the City of London for, I think it feels like it's been forever, but probably close to 7 years. And I think stress and stress management has been a big key area I've seen over the last 5-6 years, especially with everything that's gone on, and especially if you're in the UK, Brexit and all these things, and clients have found stress levels have been sky high, especially if you're working with lawyers, bankers, CEOs, people who are in high stressful demanding jobs. Stress is something I've had to manage in them and find ways to maneuver around that so we can kind of get the best results for them in the quickest amount of time, but also for them to be able to understand and see the key signs when they are getting stressed, and that could potentially lead down the road of emotional eating, and it could lead down the road of drinking a bit more and so forth. But I think stress for me has been even on a personal front from the pandemic and so forth, but I've seen it really heighten in the last 12 months because I think for most people they find stress is something they try not to talk about, and they're like, it's fine. Everyone uses it when someone says the word it's fine, then I know it's not. But I try and have again, my own approach with clients is we have a level of stress, so we have level 1 to 5, and if they're kind of going through a period where it's a lot of level 5, a lot of 5s, then we look and we manage and we talk about stuff. If it's not a stressful time for them at the moment, then level 1s, and we kind of prioritize different stuff in their program, but I can talk about that a little bit more later on.
Okay, that's interesting. I think, a couple of things there. Definitely dealing with people, the sort of clients we see, stress is going to be a big part of it, their life. There's no way of getting away from it, so we need to manage it. We can't eradicate it. And then interesting you say about level 5 and level 1. Is that's relative to them, so their perception, so they are rating it at 5 as opposed to some kind of objective data or metric.
So just basically based on their assumptions of how stressed they feel, because again I could tell them based on my assumption how I think they're going to feel, but again even data tracking, sleep tracking, all these things are based on their assumptions of how they're feeling. We can look at data, we can look at their sleep monitors, the heart rate monitors and stuff like that, and then we can make a estimated or a guesstimated guess on how stress is, how they're recovering and so forth. But I usually try and see how they feel or what their assumptions are of certain things, because it'll be very different to what I think. But I think most people look and handle stress differently, because some people, regardless of what they do, they're going to be stressed out their eyeball. I'm like, how do you feel? I just feel stressed about everything, life stress. And then some people can handle it a little bit better, but it's finding ways to manage and cope with relative stress to them.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a key one. Recognising there's a subjective element to it, and that you can still use some objective metrics to help guide that. So maybe we'll look at that later. And just thinking about that, I've got a client who, he's now sold his IT company for X amount of money, but I remember him telling me, I joke because he was always high stress, that once you've sold the company, the deal's done, you're set for life, you never have to work again. Then the stress will come down, and he just looked at me and was like, I'll find something to be stressed about. Some people are always stressed, and some people thrive on it to an extent. I suppose then again it's what works for the individual, and that's part of the art of being a good coach is finding what helps them move forward. If we can quickly look at some of the objective stuff, some of the metrics people could be using to guide their decision making, and then we'll move into more the art rather than the science of it, I think.
So if I'm, let's say I'll use a client for example, just an annual client. So if we're doing their weekly check-in, we're having a chat, then I would kind of rate. So basically on the weekly check-in we have different stuff, like I'll look at stuff such as like readiness to train, mood throughout the day, how they kind of perceive their quality of life, how they perceive like individual interaction throughout the day, their productivity at work, and all these little things. And if most of them they're scoring high in terms of stress, then we know I may need to, for like a phase, and it may affect their nutrition, it may affect their training, it may affect their recovery. So for instance, I may not, if they have a period of really high stress, not completely smash them into the floor in the gym. Look at their calories. I probably won't try and get them to diet at a period where they're really stressed, because again, as we know, dieting is a stress to the body. And too much of stress from like your day-to-day life and from dieting and all these things can compound, and that can have an effect on the diet itself, can have an effect on your compliance, it can have an effect on your sleep and all these little variables. So I think tracking on how they feel, and if somebody's constantly stressed and if they have a relationship with food where they emotionally eat or they just binge on certain things, dieting at that moment in time may not be ideal for them. So we may go to a slightly different approach where we hold things back a little bit. We may give them a little bit more calories. We may kind of, instead of doing like HIIT training, for example, we may do something like slow and steady, kind of even stuff in the gym. It may not be stuff like where we may not add in stuff like such as drop sets and so forth. It may be something just as relative strength training, where we're not going to completely smash the central nervous system, because again, I think some people misinterpret strength training and drop sets and all these kind of things. If you are doing let's say advanced techniques and drop sets and rest pause and whatever you want to call muscle rounds, all these things are going to have an effect on your central nervous system. It's pretty similar to strength training, but knowing when to push someone to failure. So we may spend more time looking at someone's RPE or RIR and things like that if they are constantly stressed, so we don't completely smash them into the floor. But yeah, I think it's, for me, with a client who may be particularly stressed, is we'll really try and go through different mesocycles, and you kind of have to spend a little bit more time on that with a client who has a high-powered job and is constantly stressed about every other thing. And I think it takes a lot more planning than if it was just someone who goes to the gym, who's not really stressed at work, who's does a 9 to 5, who doesn't get stressed out about a lot of things. Then their training will be a lot different. That's why I kind of always say you always want to match your training to your life demands and your nutrition as well. It has to complement each other.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think the thing got to think is we're not coaching robots, we're coaching people, and people have stuff going on in their life outside of the gym. So I like that, and so essentially you auto-regulate the training they're doing and the nutrition that supports that training based on the stress levels they have. And I think that makes perfect sense, given you kind of we talked before about this, but you have your stress bucket. There's only so much stress an individual can handle, and if that's almost overflowing, training is still just a stress on the body, and the body doesn't necessarily recognise the difference between the stress of training, the stress of your boss giving you a bit of a bollocking for missing a deadline, or someone cutting you up in traffic. It's all just accumulating a stress. So we need to know when to pull back and when to push with the training. So I think that's very useful for any coaches out there listening, how they might apply this to their situation, their practice, their clients. Now, you talked about emotional reaction and like the binge eating being an example of that. Seems to me that the stress is going to occur, and that's going to trigger a behaviour that is a habit that they have. So we need to be proactive ourselves as coaches and sort of flag that up in advance. This may happen, and here's some strategies to deal with it. If we follow that kind of emotional binge eating approach, how can you set them up for success to avoid making what we perceive as a mistake of having that trigger of the stress and then immediately reaching for the Ben and Jerry's?
So say, for example, say a new client comes to me, their consultation, their initial assessment, I will do my method of like tracking different things like their sleep, stress, like emotional response to food and day-to-day stuff. If those things trigger, and I'll ask questions about how is your relationship with food? Do you find that when you are stressed you tend to eat more, eat a bit less? How does it affect you? And then if it is a trigger for them, then we may alter their calories ever so slightly in terms of giving them a little bit more food during the week, or we may give them a bit more carbohydrates over fat. We may look at implementing different foods into the diet just to allow for that. But if it's someone who, again, it goes back to what I was saying before, if it's somebody who's in a state where they're probably not ready to diet very hard, then we may do a phase of getting them to diet but using a different strategies and like maybe not meticulously tracking macros. We may get them to that after like 8 to 12 weeks, but the first phase would be just highlighting different areas that we need to work on, potentially like their sleep, their relationship with food, and not looking at all food as like, oh, I'm going to have a carbohydrate, it's going to make me fat. Like a lot of people that I've worked with in the city tend to have this misconception, this skewed idea that eating certain foods will make them fat. I think a lot of people do have that anyway.
Yeah.
But especially, I think people who are, let's say, like very demanding in their jobs. So when they come and see us, they're very, very demanding, as in they need the absolute best. So my job is to get them there, but in the safest possible manner. So I will initially draw up the, let's say, an assessment form. They'll rate different areas of their life based on that assessment form, and then I'll look at the top 3 and work towards that, whilst obviously getting them the goal, hitting their goal, getting the results. But if they're not ready to do an aggressive diet, so for most people, I get most people to sign on with me for a minimum of 6 months, just so I can go through these different phases with them. So the first phase, they may be coming to me and have no stress whatsoever. I'm like, okay, cool, we can go straight into a diet and make it a little bit more extreme, so to speak. But some people might not be able to handle it from day one. Their digestive system can't handle it. They're very stressed, so they're not going to be taking in food properly. They may be going to the toilet very regularly. They may be not sleeping. All these things, if you put someone on an extreme diet at this moment in time, is probably going to be a recipe for disaster. So if I know that all these things need to be worked on, then I may give them a slightly higher calorie approach. I may give them a bit more food on the weekend. I find that approach works for a lot of people who work in the city, because they like to be social with their friends and family and stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Monday to Friday might be slightly lower, and then Saturday and Sunday might be slightly higher to allow for that. So again, if it is someone that tends to emotionally eat and gets stressed and tends to go and look at food as a way to comfort themselves, then we may go for calorie swaps in terms of, okay, instead of having the Ben and Jerry's, have XYZ.
Halo top.
Yeah, Halo top is the way forward.
Yeah, you can't gain fat if you eat Halo top. It's impossible.
Exactly, it's more anabolic. But yeah, I think it's just looking at stress, and if you are adding more stress into someone's life, again, we need to realize that most people who are busy professionals aren't trying to prep for a bodybuilding show. They may want to get there one day, or they may want to get to do a photo shoot, but you have to kind of look at the individual as something in front of them. Like everyone's a different case. Like you can't be like, okay, cool, Tom. If I was going to prep Tom, it'd be very different than I was going to prep Joe, who's a 50-year-old businessman that works in the city, who has 3 kids, who just wants to lose like 15, 20 pounds. Would be very different to Tom, who wants to get absolutely shredded and do a photo shoot. There's going to be a different approach completely from day one.
Yes, you need to meet the client where they are, and take them on that journey. And I think there's a couple of things. So type A personalities, or the really successful people in the city we're referring to there, they obviously have a skill set that allows for success because they've showcased that in their workplace. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the skills required to achieve the physical success they're looking for. So you can kind of capitalise on the good elements they have, but they're going to need educating. They're a big beginner in the gym often. And that's also frustrating, as you said. They want the best and they want it yesterday, and they're used to receiving that. And transforming your physique, building strength, gaining muscle takes time. So I like the fact that you say, like, tell them they've got to sign up for at least 6 months to give you a chance to take them through those phases. And also the fact that as a coach we can't just add stuff in. It's quite tempting from our point of view to be like, oh, you need to do this and just throw stuff on top. But sometimes it's actually a case of, I need to hold this stuff back because they haven't got capacity for it. They haven't got the threshold to, or the available bandwidth to keep chucking stuff up. And I think just a slight random thing, but thinking of like a beginner coach, like it's tempting to want to showcase how much you know and I can do all this stuff, and you just throw everything at them. Sometimes the best thing to do is actually just like almost a minimum effective dose. Just give them a little bit to move them forward, and then just keep layering that on. Which I think is definitely something I've seen you do with people you're working with. And that stacks over time.
Yeah, I think it depends. every time somebody comes to me, even if they've had some level of experience, especially if it's someone in the city, I just imagine they're a complete beginner who knows absolutely nothing. 90% of the time they don't even know what protein is, so I usually am right on that front. But I kind of imagine them as a complete beginner. We do an assessment, and based on that assessment, I start them where they're at. They could come in the gym, hip hinge perfectly, squat perfectly, dumbbell press, bench press, whatever it is perfectly, and I'm like, okay, cool, we can start you at this point, and then it's easier to push them through the phases. Generally most people in the city, don't have much coordination. I'm sure you've seen that yourself.
Yeah.
Don't have much coordination, aren't very strong, very unstable. They don't have, it's not that they can't train. It's like learning a language. Like, I'm not going to assume someone's going to go and learn French the first day and be able to read a book in French. There has to be levels to it. So they will come into the gym. It's about also being able to learn how to do certain things. They may pick up very quickly and then we can push them through the phases really quickly, but I think when it comes to like stress and like you're talking about like different levels of it, if you've got too much stress in your life from different avenues and you're going to the gym and you're smashing yourself into the floor, then you have to look at that's going to potentially lead you to injury, and then you're not going to have any chance to recover, and you're not going to have any chance to actually be able to train because you're just going to be constantly sore. I think it's also doing too much too soon. You can't really train if you've got DOMS the whole time. Again, DOMS and muscle soreness is another stress of the body. It's not going to allow you to kind of push your full maximum potential doing anything in the gym and just general life.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, so meeting the person where they are with their training abilities, like training is a skill and becoming better at that, but all of this is a skill that can be learned and improved over time. Like, so if you're someone who struggles with stress now, doesn't mean you will necessarily always struggle, or you will certainly struggle less if you put the right steps in place. So yeah, stress management is a skill just as much as anything else. Now, before we maybe look at some of the elements of improving that skill and your ability to tolerate stress and manage it, I suppose what we haven't really identified are like some of the downsides of stress. Like, people kind of go, oh yeah, stress is bad, but what are some of the symptoms? How does it show up in a typical client if they are overstressed? What will you be seeing with them?
So you find, one thing I know when someone's really stressed is, it's something as simple as they come into the gym, their head's down, they look at the floor, their mood changes, they don't really, I can tell like when somebody is stressed or something's on their mind in the first like 2-3 minutes, because they just literally from one session to the next, it's like they've completely forgotten everything with it. I'm like,
yeah.
Are you okay there? Like, are you fine? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, are you sure you're fine today? No, I'm not. The concentration just completely goes. So I know there's something wrong. It could just be that day, or it could be work stressful. And other telltale signs are digestion is not great, they're feeling bloated, potentially their skin breaks out in like spots, they just get really bad irritation when they're eating anything, they've lost their appetite, your sleep's interrupted. You may get the hours in sleep, but it may not be great quality, and you're not recovering from your sessions, and you don't see any changes in your logbook, or you see changes from week to week in the gym. And you may potentially be getting more injured, because I know from a personal perspective, the only times I've ever really gotten injured is not in the gym or not from training. It's usually when I'm really stressed, and just these little niggles just pop up from nowhere. I think last time I was doing a show, I injured my back I bent down to tie my shoelace, and I sneezed and my back just went, and I was like, okay, this is great. But that was a period where I was dieting on low calories, I was doing more cardio, I was basically threw everything at it at a certain point. Levels of stress were high from other parts of my life, and I just didn't manage it properly.
Yeah, exactly. So you were depleted and you had other stresses, and that sort of is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. I think you're right with those injuries. It's very often something that seems so simple. Bending down to pick up a pencil, tying your shoelaces, and you say it's like a perfect storm for a back injury is like bending over, turning slightly, and sneezing all at the same time. You're in a vulnerable position, plus stress is through the roof.
I think there's a sweet spot. So even with your training, to get the most, like, you don't have to, like you were saying, a really good point was effective minimum dose. So with anything, you have to have an effective minimum dose. Like, give yourself, start where you can still get the most benefit by not doing too much. So again, with cardio, for example, if you put cardio into someone's plan, or you start doing cardio, don't go from doing, let's take steps for example, don't go from doing 2,000 steps a day to 20,000. because you're going to find you're going to be absolutely destroyed and feeling really, really tired the whole time. So potentially, if you're doing 2,000, next week do 5,000, then do 7, then do 10, and then hold it there for a bit, see how you feel, see how you're recovering, all these little things. That's why tracking data and all these things are important, but don't try and go from 0 to 100 within the space of a week. And I think most people who start a diet tend to do that. They go from 0 to 100, last 2 weeks, they get bored, and they just can't really stick to it. Same thing with like stress, and same thing with like recovery in the gym. Don't go from doing 2 sessions a week, especially a big thing with the pandemic and lockdown. I think most people were doing maybe 2-3 bodyweight sessions.
Yeah.
Going back in the gym 5 days, I feel sore the whole time. I can't move my arms, I can't move my legs, I can't sit on the toilet seat. Well, okay, great. Oh, I'm getting little niggers, little injuries. I was like, okay, well, you need to kind of hold back a little bit. You can't go from 0 to 100. It's impossible.
Yes. Yeah. All good points. So quickly, just to recap, some of the symptoms that were of stress, we had like low mood, distracted, or like a lack of focus, poor digestion, like breakout skin spots, a loss of appetite. One thing is also I find like a gain of appetite. We'll cover that in a second. Like poor sleep, athletic performance, like performance in the gym suffers, and injury risk. And I think there's a couple ones there. So like the distracted or lack of focus one is one I really see a lot with people. Like you talk to them, you tell them what the exercise is, what maybe the key point we want them to focus on while they're performing the reps and executing, and like how many reps they're shooting for, and then they'll be like, so how many? And you're like, it's the third time I've told you target is 12 reps here, like see if you can get to 12, and they're like, oh sorry, and like their mind's all over the place. I see that quite often, and that's one of those ones where sometimes you have to take a step back, give them a chance. It's like maybe that's even a case where you just get them on the foam roll, not for anything other than that they're just going to have a bit of headspace, let that move, whatever works for them, but give them a chance to flush that out. The loss of appetite and gain of appetite is a funny one, because I see with people it seems to just go, it's like polar opposites. You react in one way or the other. Some people are so stressed they forget to eat and they just like lose appetite, and some people the way they stress or deal with stress is almost like they just got their head in a trough 24/7. They're always eating.
Think of it because stress, like if you look at the HPA axis, so you're basically the axis that kind of controls the cortisol, stress, the adrenals, all these kind of. If you're constantly like, if cortisol is super high, it has an effect on your adrenal system.
Yeah.
That's why it has an effect on your energy, has an effect on your appetite. If your cortisol is ridiculously high all the time, you're constantly stressed, and again, if you're an anxious person, this can have an effect on your hunger and so forth. So if you're, for example, constantly stressed, your adrenal system is shot, you've got low energy, low mood, that potentially will probably like destroy your appetite, and you will not want to eat anything. And when you do eat, you're force feeding yourself. I think most people, even if you look at yourself, if you like think about it, if you're like, okay, when I'm usually really happy, my appetite seems to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And usually when I'm stressed, it tends to be, some people just emotionally eat.
Yes.
But they tend to, when there's emotionally eating, you're not going to go and emotionally eat protein and veg. You're going to emotionally eat ice cream or cakes or pizzas and stuff like that. That will give you a bit of an energy boost because you've got low energy.
Yes. Okay.
It's never ever going to be, oh, I'm just going to, I really fancy chicken and sweet potato.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Binging on broccoli, brown rice, and chicken.
I had a client who did that. He was like binging on broccoli, and I was like, okay, that's a bit weird, but whatever flows your boat.
You have to have the exception to every rule. You're right though, with that that sort of emotional eating, it's always hyper palatable foods, right? Where something that gives us that little chemical kick in our brain that make, this feels good, and it you feel amazing like for a split second as you taste it, and then it disappears. So it's great for you in the short term and terrible for you in the long term in many respects in that way. And another point you made with that minimum effective dose, which I think was really good, you almost got to give yourself like the longest runway possible, the biggest window of opportunity to add things on, and that's a key takeaway. I think with anything training or diet related is give yourself that opportunity to have somewhere else to go when this stops working, as opposed to being tempted to be like, I'm going 100 miles an hour from the get-go.
I think most people don't realise I think most normal people don't realise in a diet, you lose body weight, you lose body fat, your resting metabolic rate drops. So potentially, that's when you may add stuff you may throw stuff into the mix, as in like more cardio, reduce your calories, add more stuff to your workouts with more volume, which again will reduce, like you put you in a bit bigger calorie deficit, because as your body weight drops, your resting metabolic rate drops, so you need less calories, or do more output, whatever it is. So that's why there has to be, like you said, a long runway. So don't start from really low calories, and then I think some people who do extreme diets going 1,000 calories, 2-3 weeks in, the weight stopped moving. okay, what do I do now? Am I going to go walk more? Well, you may do, but how much energy do you have?
You're going to be crawling, you're going to be walking.
Not that much. So if you do start a diet, it kind of links back to why I tell people I want to do a longer 6-month stint. Is I want to get you to a place where your body's responding better, stress is good, sleep's good, digestion good, all these things are good. So when we do start a diet per se, you're in a fantastic place. So the diet should feel easier, not some people you have to, if they come to you for a specific reason, like I've had in the past, you're going to have to start them on low calories because they're not going to be able to take it more. And it's only going to be for a short period of time. I think maximum I go is like 12 weeks if I was going to diet someone, because you're just having to fight so many different things at once.
Yeah, you so a really good point there was also you talked about like you get them in a great place to get good results. Yeah. It's like I talk about like having primer phases. So you're setting them up for success, and that's by specific training protocols, but also the nutrition that supports that. And I think that's a key one. Like to get buy-in is maybe difficult for this because people want results. They want to see movement on the scales tomorrow. But if you can convince them of the fact that, okay, if you do this and now, we're creating a great foundation, and you might feel like you're not making those leaps forward, but if you take some small steps forward now, build that foundation, it means you can make massive jumps forward in a month, 2 months time or whatever, and we'll get to that end point that you really want to get to, and it'll be plain sailing or a smooth landing, as opposed to like massive turbulence and like screeching off the runway type thing, for a crap analogy from planes or whatever. Like you bring that into land nice and softly because of the groundwork we did early, as opposed to taking off early and then being like, we just got to land this thing. Everything's gone crazy. So I think that's a really good point, and a key takeaway for any coaches listening is investing up front for the long-term result. Is that, from a practical standpoint, is that something that's a difficult sell or a hard sell for some clients?
I think for most people, I think it depends on like I kind of have to look at each person that comes to me, and if each person that comes to me, some people will be like, yeah, you know what, I want to kind of have the more sustainable approach, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. If somebody comes to me, like you said, an alpha, I want this, I'm like, you kind of have to talk to them and say, okay, we're going to get you the result you want in the quickest amount of time. But I will still go through my little phase of my assessments and so forth, but I will get them to where they want to get to in that time frame. But it doesn't mean that I have to aggressively diet to get them there. I may do different things to get them to that point, but still go through my phases and my approaches and so on. But I'm always like, you know what, for you to see the body you actually want, you have to give yourself a minimum of 6 months. You may get a fantastic result, and like I've got some clients like shredded in 12 weeks, but the goal is, okay, there may be a point where you will get a bit more tired, we have to make things a bit more aggressive at the end, but like I said, with the check-ins and stuff, it's me managing all these little data points and elements, so I'm not getting you to a point where you feel like complete and utter crap.
Yeah. So, like you say, those 12-week transformations, like you've had people get phenomenal results, and we've all seen them on like social media. They're a great sales pitch. People are excited because people want a quick fix, but one of the problems, if you don't manage those right, there's obviously the rebound. So there's like there's the before picture, there's the after picture, and then the after picture is worse than the before. So got to be careful of that. And I think as you're explaining that, though, it makes sense because there's a constant dialogue with the client, and you're telling them what's ahead. Like you're always a couple of steps ahead, so they can see where they're going, but also know when they reach that hill, what's over the next one. So they've got their head in the right space of looking forward and not always thinking, I need a result now. I've got an end point I'm trying to achieve. So I think that made sense from what you're suggesting there. So another question from me when it comes to stress is like, okay, what we've talked about some of the causes we see with people, like work stress, relationship stress, training being a stress. Are there anything you think we've just kind of skipped over here that we haven't really covered, or with causes for stress? I mean, obviously there's an infinite amount, but are there any key ones you think, we need to pay a bit more attention to that?
I think it's just all. I think we kind of like mentioned most of. I think also mental stress is like, again, if anxiety and all these little things which aren't really talked about, they're seen as more of a dogma or a stigma.
Yeah.
Especially in men, if you're constantly like, if everything else is going fine in your life, relationship, all these kind of things, but you're an anxious person, or you just don't know how to talk about when you are stressed, all these things can have an effect, especially with the pandemic and how things are. We've all been stuck at home and having to do 1 million split squats, which causes stress itself. But if you're just very closed off and never open to talking about stuff, I think that is alone going to cause high levels of stress regardless. And I think, barring all the other stuff, if you're very like closed off and you don't want to talk to your like closest friends and family and stuff about it, that's another way that can potentially make all the other things compound and feel a lot worse, and will lead to potentially emotional eating and low compliance to the diet and all these little individual factors. So I think we spoke about like relationships, work, life, all these kind of things, but being open to talking about it is, I think, the first step for most people, rather than, if you're not going to talk about it, then it's never going to really get any better, because how do you expect a problem to get better if you don't try and tackle it head on? I know some people are going to be like, yeah, but it's not easy. Again, most of these things aren't easy to talk about, but if you do talk about it, there's a potential place for it to change. There's potential for it to change, but if you don't ever talk about it, then you can't really tackle what's in front of you.
Yes, yeah, good point. So yeah, you're right. Like there's mental, physical, emotional stress, all these different types, and I suppose people are vaguely aware of them. But the key thing, especially if we coach a lot of guys, it's a taboo topic. Like no guys telling you how stressed they are, or by and large will sort of bottle it up, pretend everything's fine, and try and present that calm exterior, but actually behind the scenes it's going crazy. So as a coach, I think you need to dig a little bit deeper. But then if you're just someone who's training hard themselves and wanting to get results, and you're kind of pretending, putting your head in the sand and pretending there's no stress, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And you're right, it needs to be talked about, or to give it a chance to be addressed. You need to almost give it some breathing space to acknowledge that we all have stress. Like, no one's stress-free, and that's normal, and that you should have stress, but then how can you make the best of that situation? So with that in mind, let's think about some stress management topics or strategies. So for example, I can think like some ones that come to my mind: yoga, meditation, journaling, mindfulness. Those sort of things. What approaches have you used personally with clients?
I've actually used all of those approaches. I do, again, something. I think 5 years ago I was working in a gym in London, body transformation gym, doing an obscene amount of hours, constantly tired, constantly stressed. The relationship took a backseat, just working the whole time, constantly studying, constantly trying to get better. Literally, I went away on holiday once and I literally my body just shut off.
Yeah.
Because I was so basically it was like living off coffee, like 7 coffees a day, just constantly working. Never spoke about my stresses or what was bothering me or anything, and it just went.
Yeah.
Literally, my body just went I went away to Paris and it was just like, I couldn't barely move. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I had the coffee and I woke up again. But generally, if you are like these things for men, I talk to some of my clients about, let's go and try and do some yoga. No, man, I don't want to do yoga. It's not very manly. Trust me, just go and do some yoga. It's just more not for the element of going to do the thing itself. It's just for the breathing element, the diaphragmatic breathing, and just relaxing, and it has an effect on your sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system. So about stress and relax has an effect on that, can have an effect on your digestive system, on how you perceive the stress to be. So if you're constantly in a state of being fight or flight, you're constantly in a state of being constantly stressed about stuff, you're going to perceive something to be a lot worse than it actually is. And again, goes back to talking. If you don't talk about these things, then you're going to constantly be in that state. Sympathetic. You're not going to be able to kind of just control yourself, control your emotions. So journaling, meditation. Meditation is one of those things that takes a while to get into. At first, when I did it, I would just fall asleep. Getting to client.
That's a pretty good stress management strategy.
Yeah, I know. Ideally, it defeats the purpose of it, but all these things can help you get into a place where you're in a state of mind where you're present.
Yes.
And I think with a lot of things, even the gym, life, you want to kind of be present in everything you do to get the most of it. Like learning a skill, skill acquisition, you have to be present in the moment to get better at it.
Yeah.
If you're just constantly there, if you're there or not really there, you're not really listening or paying attention, you're not going to get the most bang for your buck. If you're constantly stressed, your body's not going to be working the way it wants to be. So journaling. If we look at training itself, then I look at stuff like measuring people's HRV, measuring their, like, even if they didn't want to measure the HRV, I'd look at stuff like readiness to train. So I'll rate the readiness to train on a scale of 1 to 10. So if they're constantly feeling like they're not they don't really want to train, they're just not in the mood, they just don't feel like they're enjoying their sessions, then that could potentially look like a red flag for me. Okay, cool. Then we need to look at different strategies. Okay, maybe go and get a massage, go to spa, go do a sauna steam, go and swim, go and look at your training. Like how many days do we do on, how many days we do off. That again is fine tuning it. But journaling is also one which I found really helpful, especially if you're not used to talking to people. Just like writing down everything that's going on in your head, and you usually feel a lot better.
Yeah. It's you're right. There's like again, we both predominantly work, I would say, with guys, and then like tend to find this stuff harder, and it's not alpha to say you do yoga or meditation, but actually there's huge benefits to it, and I think one of the small benefits of lockdown was that I could get guys to do yoga because there was no one there to sit, so they just did it followed a YouTube or whatever, and close the curtains, whatever. No one could see them doing it. One of the things is they're just worried about walking into a yoga studio, being the only guy, looking a bit silly because they can't do it properly, this sort of thing. And then actually, it probably isn't the stress reducer we want it to be because they're anxious about it looking silly.
Well, it could be because I usually go to yoga. I'm single, and it's usually me and a group of like 20 women. So. Yeah. Life could be worse.
you could put the odds in your favour there.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's like one of the small things I found. Like, actually, guys were like more likely to do some of this stuff, and they were just at home, and no one could see them because they were embarrassed to be judged or whatever before. So getting over that. But the other thing is, I find like giving it a different name. Like I've for example, like training, I've sometimes got people like essentially maintenance phase with their weight. We're not looking to push it up or down, we just want to hold it, but no one likes maintenance, so I call it like a strength block, and we focus on the lifts in the gym, and like suddenly we switch from their physique to the performance results to give them something positive to focus on. I think it's a bit the same with like meditation, like just calling it breathing drills or something. If it gets the person to do it and get the desired outcome, as a coach it's all about a bit of PR really, but marketing it to them so that they get the benefit that you want out of it. So all of those things, like we said, yoga, meditation, journaling, being mindful, I think, and present in the moment is a really good one, a really difficult one. Like we're all just sort of glued to our phones and distracted. But you're right, if you want to improve your skill acquisition, you need to be present. And massage and things like that. I suppose anyone listening, you'll know like, oh, if I do this, like, this really seems to chill me out and I feel great and I feel relaxed. That's probably an activity you want to be trying to get more of. It's kind of, we think about working out, sometimes you need to work in, like what can I put in that's going to help me restore and repair and recover and be in a good headspace. And it's also good you went and talked about some sort of objective data points you use to gauge it. So HRV, like resting heart rate is a good one, and readiness to train. And I think if people just implement a couple of those, they'll find them really useful. And you'll maybe start noticing trends, like, oh, okay, after I have my big end of month sales meeting or whatever, my energy levels tank, my readiness to train goes out the window, and my HRVs suddenly very different. These sort of things, and then it's just all useful data. Like can make outcome-based decisions. If you've been tracking this stuff and these are the trends, what can we do to influence those trends? So I think those are sort of some really useful takeaways for people.
I think if you don't do that now, then you should probably try and do that. Even just like managing or like tracking your readiness to train. If you know you're training Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you get to Thursday, you feel like someone's like smashed you with a hammer and you're just completely shot and you can't do anything. Friday gets back, you're so tired. Then you can look at it and say, okay, maybe 3 days on the bounce is too much. So maybe try and train Monday, Tuesday, go and do something, yoga, cardio, something that's a bit less intense on the body. Just allow yourself a bit more time to recover. For example, if I did 3-4 days on the bounce, it gets to the fourth session, I'm like, it's just pointless. I'm not going to get any return from it. So trying to make some progressive overload and trying to get stronger at the gym and seeing more benefit, you want to be able to give it 100% because you're in the gym for an hour. What you do in those other 23 hours of the day is ideally what's going to make fat loss or muscle building more effective. So either your diet, your training, your diet, your sleep, your stress management, all these things. Because I think most people get it mixed up that, oh yeah, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to spend 3 hours in the gym, I'm going to do this and this and this. Yeah, but it's an hour of the day. You're basically using those 23 other hours of the day to get closer to your result. the 1 hour you spend in the gym will help you by lifting weights, resistance training, doing cardio, so forth. But that's not what's gonna be the main determinant factor in your ability to get that result.
Yes, yeah, really good point. And we all focus on sort of infinite detail on our training and that 1 hour, and think that's a miracle, and that it's going to take care of everything. But it's the bigger pictures you have to look at, and training creates the potential for change.
Yeah.
But you have to do everything the other 23 hours of the day to allow you to reach that potential. And I think stress management is a huge component of that, and one that's like often overlooked. Like my online clients, consider themselves hard gainers, generally quite anxious and always in their own head, second guessing themselves, and that takes its toll. Because you mentioned parasympathetic and sympathetic, and for those that don't know, like, so you've probably heard the phrase like rest and digest. That would be parasympathetic, and fight or flight is the sympathetic. And basically, we need both of those for our survival, and there's a reason we have that. But nowadays, with modern living, we're sort of almost bombarded with small stresses that add up, and we're constantly sympathetic, as opposed to, as we probably should be, is parasympathetic dominant with a little bit of sympathetic in there. And if we can start getting out of our own head and using these stress management tools, we'll have a better quality of life. We'll see better results in the gym. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think the gym again is an element of placebo as well. Like, I was training one of my clients the other day. As if you're in London, if you don't know, then if you're in a different country, the weather in London has been terrible. It's been raining
just for a change,
time. Yeah, just for a change. It's mid-May. It was mid-May. Usually it's summer. Usually it's hot. Usually it's nice, the weather. It's been like it's December. He came into the gym the week before. He was doing a trap bar deadlift. He did 130 kilos the week before. He looked like he was smiling. He was in better spirits. He looked like he was jumping about, had a spring in his step. We put 140 kilos in the bar, because he did his warm-up sets. He was like, "Oh, this feels easy." Did 130. It was flying up. Like, I was like, "What happened there?" And then we put 140 on the bar. It flew up, and I was like, he just looked like all these little things can have an effect on your training. So if you're in a better state of mind, if you're not stressed, if even the surrounding environment around you is better, your gym and your ability to lift stuff will increase. Again, this is things I've seen from working with clients in the city for years on end. You find if the weather's crap, the mood's crap, the overworking, all these things, you can get to the gym, and the last thing you want to do is try and lift something really, really heavy. Again, it works both ways. Some people just do it, get in the gym and just literally want to lift everything and just feel like they can let out all their anger. But placebo, if you think that because the weather is nice, it's going to make you lift heavier, then you go in the gym and you generally lift heavier. But if you go into the gym feeling stressed, not really feeling great, and you want to try and lift like a heavy dumbbell over your head, chances are you probably won't do it. So managing the stress and enjoying your training and enjoying life and enjoying the things, you'll go into the gym and you'll absolutely smash it.
Yes, yeah, really good. As you were doing that, I was quickly typing up on that, because I was like, essentially, you talk about that, and then the external environment, but we are a product of our environment, and environment is both external and internal. So we can you can change your surroundings and things like that, but actually the really powerful thing is you can take control to a large extent of your internal environment, your internal dialogue, the stuff you're telling yourself, also the quality of your nutrition and what you're putting in will all help. And therefore you can essentially control your internal environment, and if you can do that, that will only have a positive effect long term.
Yeah, I think training it's a relationship between internal and external stressors, and internal and external dialogue. So if you go into the gym and say, "I'm going to lift this," because and you're in a better mood, you're going to lift it. If your external environment and dialogue is you go in the gym, shoulders are down, the weather's terrible, you're just going to be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to even be here. But if you go in the gym and you say, "I'm going to do this," the weather's great, the environment is great, the music's blasting, you're in a good mood, everything's going great, you're probably more chance to lift it than when you are in the other state of mind. So if you internalize and you talk to yourself in a way that you give yourself more positive affirmations, all these things, which again is another thing which can help with stress management. If you constantly say to yourself, "I'm not going to do this, I can't do this, this is not going to happen, I hate my life," and all these using these keywords, chances are you're probably going to go into that mindset and that mood, and it's going to kind of tally on. If you go into the day, you wake up in the day. I do this a lot. I have a lot of positive affirmations where I kind of wake up and I'm like, oh, this is going to be an incredible day. Oh, the weather's amazing. Oh, I feel great. I jump out of bed. I don't get out of bed until I tell myself 3 positive things I'm going to do for that day and about life. I've been doing that for the last 6 months of the pandemic, and I feel like it's made such a massive difference.
Yeah, I like that. Nice little takeaway tip there. But so yeah, your frame of reference and the stories you tell yourself, like essentially, in time, almost become true.
Yeah.
They become reality. So yeah, those positive affirmations and just a general positive mindset and how you the slant you put on things, I think is a really powerful tip for people to take away. And then another thing that just sort of occurred to me is like it's typical for like an athlete to taper for peak performance, right?
Yeah.
So because fatigue masks fitness, and they'll reduce overall stress by reducing training stress, and that's when they showcase their peak performance. So that's for them, competing at an event. But if we think of this as a bigger picture, if you can be reducing your stress load, you're essentially setting yourself up for peak performance more often.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key things for people to be like, okay, how much effort should I put into this? Well, actually, managing stress is critical to you really capitalising, reaching your potential, whether it be strength, physique, just quality of life.
Yeah, exactly. If you did it for a week and you just managed your stress for a week, just to see like what you can do, just like pick a few key things such as your recovery from your sessions, your readiness to train, and just your quality of sleep. Those are 3 key things you can look at in terms of stress from life. If all of those things are whack, then okay, there's something that you need to work on. Then you can look back into your day-to-day life or the last few days. Has stress at work been higher? Has stress at home been higher? Have I been binging a little bit more? Have I just been under-eating, for example? That's another stress. But like if you just manage those 3 things, so your sleep, your readiness to train, and I can't even remember what the last one I said was.
Was it energy or no? Hang on, now I was all set to go. Like, oh yeah, recap those 3.
So sleep, readiness to train, and I completely forgot the last one.
Oh, he's lost his train of thought, folks. He's lost his train of thought. But I mean, yeah, the key takeaway for me was if you have some objective or some metrics you're running against, they are like your red flags. When something's showing up here, this is when I need to need to address it.
Last one was recovery.
Recovery. There we go. So yeah, if you're constantly keeping an eye on those 3 variables, and you start to see a trend, that's when something needs to give here, something needs to change. I need to pay attention to this, and so it's just almost running a little check on yourself every day. I think is a really useful takeaway for people to put to action. All right, Tarek, I think that's been fascinating for people to sort of see the role that stress plays in their life and what they can do and how we help ourselves but other clients manage it. Before we go though, I've got a few other questions for you, non-stress related. So quick fire round. Okay, so you can see I'm pretty food focused with these. Pizza or burger?
Oh, burger, 100% burger.
Good, correct answer. Chocolate or peanut butter?
Chocolate peanut butter.
Yeah, most people I just have both. Actually, most sort of North American sort of guests I have, they're like both. Almost all sort of European or like big guys based over in Oz, they're like chocolate. So it seems like a bit of a divide there. So you're just gonna have both.
I'll just have a bit of dark chocolate and scoop it into the peanut butter.
Yeah,
that's what I usually do.
A dark chocolate spoon into my peanut butter jar. Okay, beach holiday or a city break?
Ooh, tough one. I like to go on adventures and stuff, so I would probably say a city break.
Okay, city break. So talking about that's an adventure. Like, so some people will be like, "Oh, I'll go and sit on the beach and chill out." But I think it's also knowing, we're getting back to the stress here, like what de-stresses you. So some people find that escapism and like discovering and exploring a city is like amazing for them.
Yeah, I've been in Dubai for the last 6 months.
Yeah,
you don't need it. I don't need a beach holiday. I'm ready tanned.
This one's probably the easiest to answer. Steak rare or well done?
Oh, rare.
Good answer. Eggs scrambled or poached?
Poached.
Mate, there's a special one for you. I've never asked anyone this before, but hummus or hummus?
Double hummus.
Double hummus. If in doubt, eat more hummus, guys. That's the take home
very
message.
anabolic. Trust me. It will give you big arms and a big chest.
Never found without a tub of hummus about his person. Always carrying some hummus. All right, now a little different question. Tell me something about yourself that people probably don't already know.
Depends of how close you know me. So I was a semi-pro wrestler for 4 years. I had an interesting character. We'd come out with Arabic music, and I had the whole like the head thing and so forth, but let's say not many people were my biggest fans when I was doing that. So yeah, I did semi-pro wrestling. I tried to do Greco-Roman wrestling. I was like had aspirations to go to the Olympics one day. That didn't work out. So I kind of veered into the whole WWE, WWF stuff. And then it got to a point where it's like, okay, do I focus on my studies or focus on that? And I was like, okay, let me go into uni and did a law degree. Which I haven't used, so hey.
It comes in handy all the time, that law degree. So yeah, I imagine you were the baddie, like you were the villain of the piece, always being the.
I said there was a lot of like
Middle Eastern wrestler style.
I could hear there was a lot of swearing, a lot of backhanded comments coming my way, but I had to pretend I didn't hear anything.
Pantomime villain, play up to it. Okay, cool. And next question, or final question from me, is if I could interview anyone, who should I interview next?
The Rock.
The Rock. I think The Rock's had a few answers. And Arnie is another popular one.
The Rock or Marcus Rashford.
Marcus Rashford. There you go. We'll get Marcus on. Well, he might be free because he might not get selected for the England Euro squad. So maybe he'll be free for the summer. Who knows? We'll see. I heard some rumours about that, but I think Marcus will be alright. I think he'll be safe. I think he'll be going. All right, Tarek. It's been brilliant having you on the show. Please take a moment now just to let everyone know they can find out more about you, what you do, and what services you offer.
So you can find me on Instagram at _physique_institute. Again, I'm predominantly doing online training, but again, if you're in the City of London or if you're in London itself and you wanted to come and see me for some sessions, drop me a message on the Physique Institute. We can have a chat. And again, if you are someone who is struggling with their nutrition, struggling with the relationship with food, and just like the mental aspect of juggling both that with work life and stress and just being able to get to your result, drop me a message, we can have a chat. But I'm very a big believer on getting to the person to the result and giving them the tools and everything they need so they can do it for the rest of their lives. So it's not like just crash dieting, doing a 2-week diet, a 4-week, a 6-week diet, and then just telling them to go on their way. That's why I'm a big believer on not just selling like diet plans and so forth. I'm like, it's a service. You get me 24/7. You get me all day, every day. Lucky you. But
and is hummus included?
Hummus is, you get a discount on a hummus brand. I should do that actually. But no, you basically get me there with you because I want to be able to take someone from not knowing that much to being able to be self-sufficient in the gym, with the nutrition, managing the stress, being able to deal with all the mental things in life. And just saying, it's like my little babies, here you go on your way, do your thing. And I'm trying to help as many people I can get to that stage of being self-fulfilled. And I don't like using the word, but they become more sustainable.
Yes, yeah.
Nonsense.
I can vouch for that. I think that definitely Tarek does an incredible job of that with essentially educating his clients and sort of leading them through the process, but giving them the tools to go away and sort of making them self-sufficient. If we're not going with sustainable, maybe self-sufficient is a good term to describe that, because they are equipped, if they stop working with you, to keep getting results. They know the principles behind what they're doing. So I definitely check that out even, and I cannot believe you haven't already got some kind of sponsorship deal with a hummus company, because the amount you eat.
If anyone's listening to this who has deals with any hummus companies, then
you are open.
Drop me a message. I will be your key endorser.
All over Instagram promoting the hummus. All right, Tarek, thanks again. That was brilliant.
Thank you for that, Tom.